What's up, guys? I am, as always, Kyle. This is a brand new show here on the Experience called The Legends Lounge, and we had to create a new show in order to hold the spectacular, legendary level of our two guests tonight. So this is a brand new show, The Legends Lounge. Inside the Legends Lounge tonight, we have two, count them, two legends. One that's been there a while, and two that is this new project he's on is going to catapult him to that level. Welcome, everybody. The voice of many of our childhoods and currently the voice of AEW, Tony Shiavone, and the person responsible for helping Tony bring his life story to the comic book form, Mr. Dirk Manning. What's up, everybody?
Hello, Kyle. What's up, buddy?
How you doing? I'm very excited to talk to you, Tony. I've been a fan for a long time. I'm going to start here. This is actually not the first time we've met, but you have no reason to remember the first time we met.
Okay, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so you got it.
Well, that's fair. It was in Gwinnett. You were working a baseball game, and right. I was Jim Weber's piddly little helper when he was for the Mud Hens, and I was so starstruck I couldn't speak. So.
Wow. How about that? So that was at Fifth Third Field, right?
No, this was on the road. This was in
Gwinnett. Okay.
Gwinnett. Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the few road trips I got to make. And I'm like, I got to go to Gwinnett. I've been a Braves fan before I worked for the Tigers. I wanted to go to I wanted to go to a game, see a Braves game. And I wanted to come down. And so Jim's like, get on the bus. Let's go. All right.
Great Jim Weber, man.
Legend. He's a legend in his own right. Yeah, it's true. Fifth Third Field name drop. It's in my picture. It's right there.
Right. Hey, it's one of the great minor league fields in the country. It really is.
So let me ask you about that. Baseball, your first passion, or was pro wrestling your first?
No, baseball was my first, and it's like elementary school, junior high type, middle school type passion. Wasn't until I got into high school that I fell in love with pro wrestling. So baseball was first. And now, thanks to the propeller heads that run Major League Baseball, I don't give a damn about it. They've screwed it up for me, that. So
there's that. I still love, there's nothing like going to a ball game, sitting eating a hot dog, keeping score with a little golf pencil.
Yeah, and I agree. But now you've got to have your phone with your apps. You've got to have the list of the brand new rules that they put in place, and it's no longer a sport; it's a TV show. So the hell with baseball, buddy.
Hey, it's well, I understand. There's a lot of purists in the game, myself being one of them, that a lot of the new rules are frustrating. But like I said, you can't miss that, the hot dog and the Cracker Jacks and all that kind of stuff. We already have a troll in the comments. We're going to ignore Pat. Just so you know, Pat's a longtime friend of Dirk and I's and a big supporter. But I'm surprised he hasn't asked me to mute myself.
Can I say something to Pat?
Can you cut a promo on him?
Yeah, Pat, kiss our fat ass. How does that sound, buddy?
Yay! It started.
I'll see you guys.
Started.
So I want that to be a GIF forever. Thank you.
Yeah,
Tony.
We'll cut it. We'll cut it for you.
Yeah.
So let's start. Let's start at the beginning. You said middle school. And I know this is in the book, so don't we'll leave some meat on the bone there. But in middle school, you kind of came to the wrestling.
High school
fandom. High school.
Yeah, high school.
When did you come to comic books?
As long as I can remember, I've always had comic books at the house, and I say this often. It's one of those stories where I wish I would have kept those comic books from back in the '60s, right? But I remember the first comic book I remember was, I think, if I'm right, the very first X-Men comic book, X-Men comic book, and. I mean, I remember that very, very vividly, and I've seen pictures of it online, and I'm thinking, oh man, I had that. and I had like the early Captain Americas or I don't know how early Captain America was out, but I always loved the comic books. And I was telling Dirk, and I don't remember this. Dirk, you remember it. I learned some things about history in comic books because there was a comic book that was based on history. Isn't that right, Dirk? What was it called? We talked about that one night.
Oh, gosh, there was a couple. The one about the history of wrestling or just history of...
No, history of the world. I mean, real stuff.
Yeah.
Classics Illustrated did some of that.
That's it.
Yep.
Classics Illustrated. Had
Classics
a lot
Illustrated,
of those, man.
Classic, the novels. Yeah. I collect a bunch of those. Yeah.
Yeah. I learned a lot
funny.
through comics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, that shows up, bring it back around to baseball in the movie Major League. That's how, they read the classics to get the girls as they read the Classics Illustrated comic books.
Right. How about that?
Right.
Well, so
you even look at how many kids though learn to read through comic books too, and stuff like that. A good buddy, again, I'm gonna do a unsolicited podcast cross promotion. Our friend Gabe Yoakum does a podcast as well called Tradecraft. He was just interviewing Mighty Mike Negan, and Mike was talking about how he could not read when he was younger. And they finally said, give the kids some comic books. Kids love comics. And he credits that with how he learned how to read. And comic books are the only medium where you use the left and right side of your brain, which I promise in my view, that is the right way, left and right. But comics are the only medium where you use the left and right side of your brain at the same time. And it just kills me that so many people, talk about comics being dumbed down reading, but it's the only medium you use both sides of your brain at the same time to process words and images. There's your geek moment of the day.
Hey,
sorry.
You didn't make that up either, did you?
I did not.
That's your somebody's a teacher moment of the day. Somebody was an ed major.
All that schooling finally did me good.
Yeah. The rest of us trying to find ways to get out of class. Dirk's like, I'm going to do this forever. So let's talk about how the book Butts and Seats came to be a thing. Tell us kind of the origin story of the Tony Shiavone, Dirk Manning tag team collaboration.
Well, actually, it probably started, if I'm right, it started at C2E2 back in 2019 when I first met Mike Dawkins. And Conrad Thompson, who I do a podcast with, says, I want you to meet my lawyer. I think he said our lawyer. So he'd already signed me up. And we had dinner at this real nice place in Chicago, and Mike paid, which is always good. And I learned that Mike Dawkins was, a big wrestling fan, but also pretty good lawyer, pretty shrewd one, good at billing, good at making money. So for himself, that is. So and then he and I we formed a friendship. I met Mike when I was in Toledo for a Mud Hens game that year. And and that was my last year in baseball, 2019. So I got to meet Mike, and Mike said to me, he said, you ever thought about doing a comic book about your career? And it was like a light went off. I went, yeah. Everybody's done a book on wrestling. There have been great wrestling books out there. I've been asked if are you going to do a wrestling book? And I'm thinking, I don't know if I am or not, because I just didn't think my story was that compelling. So I got with, he introduced me to Dirk. Dirk thought my story was very compelling, and that's how we started. So it was the Mike Dawkins lawyer connection that started things, and it just grew from there. Mike has been with us on all of our Zoom calls. I'm not so sure why. I mean, he's been like our
billable hours.
Billable hours.
That's what billable hours. That's right. So he can charge us for the time spent. And so Mike has been, the key player in all this to get us together, and it's been wonderful. I never really thought, and Kyle, I can even throw this at you. I never thought I would get so involved with people from Toledo in my life. I mean, we've got you, we've got Dirk, we've got Dawkins. I know Jim Weber very, very well, and it's just it's been quite a run. It really has. But Dawkins is the man that started everything.
So
it's true, and I guess my side of that as well is you'd be amazing how compelling someone's story can be when they're willing to pay you. So once Dawkins came in and said, this was going to be a cash cow, Tony's story got infinitely more compelling all of a sudden. No.
Yes.
No. I'm just saying, that 2% he cut me in on, just made all the difference. No, Tony's story is really fascinating. And obviously, and Kyle, a lot of the key players here as well. I met Mike through, again, another Toledo area connection, Scoot McMahon, who co-created The Adventures of Cthulhu Jr. and Dastardly Dirk. The full book is coming this year from SourcePoint. We promise. It's coming. Don't worry. It's done. But
stop shilling.
Yeah, that's how we do. That's why we're here. We're not here just
stop shilling.
That's right. Got to make that 2%. But no, Mike came to me and again, Tony and I keep joking that we need to kind of corner Mike and ask him how long he had this in the works, because obviously he had talked to Tony the year before, or no, actually at C2E2. I was supposed to be at C2E2 as well and couldn't make it. I had a family situation that I had to suddenly fly out of state. But I think Mike's plan was to introduce Tony and I at C2E2. And then when that didn't work out, he kind of came to me after the show and goes, hey, I know you got a lot going on right now with your family and your grandpa and stuff like that. He goes, but how would you feel about doing a book with Tony Shiavone? And I had to kind of then wrestle the fan part of me, who's a big fan of professional wrestling and obviously knows who Tony is, like, to jump on it versus the commitment of my time and making sure that'd be something that fit. People primarily know me as a horror guy, but in the last couple of years, doing stuff like Haunted Highons with Twisted, doing Hope, doing Cthulhu Jr., I've been kind of broadening, I guess, the palette of what I do while still staying true to the brand of stuff I like. And people know I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. So it took one meeting with Tony and it became very obvious that this was going to be a really fun book to do. I think my initial comments to Mike were even like, well, I'll talk to Tony. We'll see what happens. And I said, and if it's not going to, I think I told Mike almost exactly, if it's not the right fit for me, I know enough people who it could be the right fit for. So it's kind of like already giving myself that out if this wasn't going to work out. But Tony was a great guy. Pleasure to work with. We've been Zooming for a year, putting this book together between Tony and Dawkins, Dave Silva, and Drina Joe, and myself. I can't even imagine how many hours we put into Zoom just telling stories and crafting the book and editing the scripts and things like that. So, and here we are. We launched the Kickstarter, and it is exceeded our wildest expectations, which you can see at buttsandseatscomic.com, like the little scrolling feed says.
Shill, baby, shill.
So
I'm here for you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just, we didn't have a chance to do this. Just so you know, Tony, when I give Dirk grief, it's because I'm the heel and he's the face.
Wow.
That's been our
That's
relationship
rare.
for 10 years.
Yes, that's right. Normally, as you might imagine, I just that heel heat just exudes from me, even when I don't mean it to. So
Yeah, buddy.
Kyle's that's
I'm
right.
the heel, he's the face. Has been for 10 years.
That's
So
right.
let me ask this question, and I know the story as a longtime wrestling fan, but for those people who are watching, maybe as comic book fans who aren't as deep into the knowledge base, where does the title Butts and Seats come from?
Well, that's a famous Tony Schiavone line from 2000, where Mick Foley won his world title in the WWE, and that had been pre-taped. Had been taped the week before, so we knew it. And Eric sent one of his people out, and I'm not going to say who she's named in the book, and sent them out to tell me to really make light or say something unflattering. I can't remember how she said it, but I remember the look on her face, eyes like a deer in headlights. Mick Foley just won the WWF title. You need to say something bad about it. I said, are you really, like, right now? And she said, yeah. And Eric's listening. So she walked away, and first thing I could think of was butts in seats. That'll put butts in the seats. And of course, as you know, it's very famous that it had a lot of people switch the channel at that moment. And of course, again, as I bring up the fact that the winners of the war always write the history, there was a lot more into it, but that's kind of like what I was known for, among other things. Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell, straight to hell, that type of thing. So it's also kind of what wrestling announcers do. They put butts in the seats. They embellish the product. They elevate the product. They talk about the wrestlers. They make them bigger than life. And it's our responsibility back then when we were selling tickets to put your butt in the seat. And so that's kind of like where it came from. Now, as Dirk will go on to say, that's what Dirk and Drita Joe and everybody on the Zoom call wanted. And I didn't really like that name, but I relented and said, okay, let's go with it. And you know what? It's obviously worked.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking because when Tony talked about, we were at least 2/3 of the way through the scripting process. We had the 10 chapters lined up, and we would get on Zoom calls and like, okay, chapter 6 is the butts and seats chapter. Let's talk about that night. There's a whole chapter on butts and seats, that incident that evening and the fallout of it. And we were about 2/3 of the way through the book, and we hadn't really decided on the title. And to me, and I've said this in other podcasts, the working title in my mind was like A Life Among Giants, because here's Tony, there's every man amongst these larger life characters, way too pretentious, was never seriously going to be the title. But to me, that was the initial one. And what it kept coming back to then in my mind after that was butts and seats, and how butts and seats. Yeah. Someone in the chat, Steven's chat just said butts and seats equals comic and hams. There you go. Mm-hmm. But the whole theme of the book was also, butts and seats. The first chapter is Tony buying his family tickets to a wrestling event, all the way up to, obviously the butts and seats incident. But even when he was out of wrestling, when Tony was out of wrestling, he was still putting butts and seats in his job. So when we had the conversation, I kind of called up Tony. I'm like, so buddy, pal, what you thinking about a book title here? And he had the title I Jabroni. I
like that title too. Oh
yeah. And it was cool, but I was worried.
Great title.
Of course, my marketing brain, was like, could we get that as a URL? Will people know what that is? As inside talk. Will people think it's Iron Sheik? Will people think it's The Rock? Will be, I'm like, And I said, all right. And Tony went on to explain the rationale behind that. And I said, okay. I said, that's not bad. I go, here's the other one we're thinking about. I got the phone, like butts and seats, the Tony Shiavone story. I kind of go like this, and there's just there's just silence. And I'm like, he goes, kind of let out this little kind of grunt, and he's like, well, I really don't want like a butt to be the logo. And I said, no, nothing like that, and we kind of talked about it, and we did woo him over. We brought in Travis McIntyre from Source Point as well. At that point, he was attached to the project. And like I said, I mean, it's working, it's catchy. And what was funny is, and I wish we timed it this way, it was like that day, like I think we talked about a day or two beforehand. Then we had our Zoom call that evening, and Mick Foley had tweeted, because it was the anniversary of the Butts and Seats event. And Tony kind of clapped back at him a little bit, and it became a pretty feel-good moment on Twitter. And I think that's what won us over. So, Mick Foley, if you're out there somewhere, thank you, because we already bought the URL at that point for Butts and Seats Comics. So,
I don't think Mick Foley wanted it. So,
Good. Luckily, we had gimmick attorney on our team already. Like,
Yeah.
we can get that. Light it up.
Yeah. What happened, Kyle, was that Mick Foley thanked everybody who was a part of him winning the world title. And I said, I was glad to be a part. My tweet was glad to be a part of it. So.
And it blew up. The tweet blew up. It was so funny.
That's a great tweet. By the way, I may or may not have just bought ijabroni.com. So
you're going to
I'll
get a
be
phone
talking
call
to you soon.
For when you need it, I've got it. You can have
it.
Scott James in the comments, excited to see my cover and pages in print. Guys, go back a couple of weeks on our Friday night Talking Shop show to see my interview with Scott talking about his work on this book. And the boss is in the comments.
Oh, Drina Joe's in the house. You
out.
gotta behave now. She knew we were getting rowdy.
So let me ask a question that is fascinating to me and maybe not to anyone else, but I don't care. Tony, what drew you to broadcasting?
Well, Kyle, I can't remember wanting to do anything else. I was a baseball fan, and we're talking about 5th grade, 6th grade, maybe 4th grade. Really? Young kid, loved baseball. Didn't get to play baseball till I was 13 because we didn't have a Little League program. We had a Babe Ruth program. And I had a good friend of mine, Johnny. Johnny was a Baltimore Orioles fan, and I was an Oakland A's fan. And we're talking early 70s. And we used to play this board game called Stratomatic Baseball, which is based on stats. And it's a pretty good dice board game, especially back in the day when there were no video games or anything like that. There were just board games around. And we used to play Stratomatic Baseball on the phone. He and I lived a couple of miles from each other, and I would get on my phone at home, the home only phone we had, and Johnny get on his phone, and we both had a game, and we played it and I would do the play-by-play for it as we were playing the game. I also had a friend of mine named Ricky Ellinger lived across from me. He was blind from birth, and he used to sit out on the front porch in a swing and listen to baseball games on the radio. And I would walk across the street and sit with him, and we would listen to WSB out of Atlanta, the big stations, 3WE out of Cleveland back then. And we even could pick up some Yankee games on WABC at times, WLW out of Cincinnati. So that's how I spent my summer nights, listening to broadcasters on the radio doing baseball games. And that's how I fell in love with not only baseball, but I fell in love with the idea of, wouldn't it be great just to sit down and watch a baseball game and talk about it? And so broadcasting was the only thing I've ever wanted to do. I know there's been a lot of people who've had many different career choices, career changes. I think Lois has had 40 before she settled on being a mom. But for me, there was never, I can't remember not wanting to be anything else. So it all started with my love of baseball and baseball announcers on the radio. And that's just it. That's just, we're talking about from elementary school on through it. And I knew I wanted to do it. And I remember we were talking about Jim Weber, the great voice of the Mud Hens. Somebody asked Jim, I read a story on him when he got inducted into the International League Hall of Fame. They said, Jim, you've been doing it for so long, because Jim started, listen, this is how long Jim's been doing it. He started broadcasting Mud Hen games when I was a junior in high school. That's how long he's been doing it. Mm-hmm. Long time. And someone asked Jim, when are you going to retire? He said, retire from what? Watching a baseball game? So
yep,
it was like the greatest job ever. And I did have a chance to do it extensively. So announcing was it, man. It's all I ever wanted to do. I couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah, for me, it was Jim and Frank Galuli and the legend Ernie Harwell.
Right.
Like those guys, they could bring a baseball game to you, sneak in the little AM transmitter with the headphones in under the covers after I was supposed to be asleep to listen to an away Tigers game.
Yeah.
That was it, man. That was everything.
Yeah.
I do have to interject you real quick. Tony, why am I just hearing this amazing story about you sitting on the porch with your childhood friend who was blind Where was that 5 months ago when we were writing this?
Well, when we do a graphic novel on my baseball career, that'll be in there.
All right, fair. You heard it here first, right?
See, I was just thinking, just add another stretch goal and add another chapter.
And again, this is, I guess, like the inside baseball of making comics. It's like Tony's telling this story of like walking across the street, and I picture like the young Tony walking across the street and sitting there with the radio and your buddy. And well, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Maybe if this graphic novel does well enough, maybe we'll get to do a sequel. Who knows?
And that's, Rob Humphrey in the comments kind of giving you the same comment, that you were just talking about, is your voice brings back his nostalgia of watching wrestling with his grandfather. So how does it feel to be one of those guys?
Well, I guess if you live long enough and do it long enough, you're going to be one of those guys, right? I really thought, Kyle, that back in the Nitro / Thunder WCW era that I was on too much, to be honest with you. But I'm the type of person that when they want you to do something, you go ahead and you do it. And because I did Nitro, then I did Thunder, and I did all the pay-per-view. So anytime you turned on a WCW event, you heard my voice. And I thought back then, man, you're hearing a lot of me, man. It's like my story with Ricky Steamboat was, Ricky came up to me my first time ever did play-by-play, and he said, man, you sound really, really good. You made me want to stop and listen backstage to what was being said. And I said, Ricky, I appreciate you saying that, but you only stopped and listened because it was a voice you hadn't heard before. I said, one of these days, if I'm lucky enough, you're going to be sick of hearing my voice. So I think that people were sick of hearing my voice. And then, of course, I went away for quite a while and came back after 18 years away from the business, and they heard my voice again and immediately brought them back to the 90s, their childhood. And I'm happy for it. I'm proud of that. I'm shocked by it, to be honest with you. I never even envisioned that I would be a voice of anyone's childhood, but I do realize it more than ever about wrestling fandom and about how fans are really emotionally drawn into wrestlers, because we're not just a sport. We're a sport with stories and characters that you try to identify with, or characters that you try to hate or like. And so I can understand the passion that fans have for wrestling. So with that in mind, I guess years later now, since I've been back, which has really been since 2017, I'm not surprised about people saying, oh, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you're the voice of my childhood. And it was very uncomfortable at first, but now it's to a point to where, yeah, I appreciate it. I really do.
So let's talk more about the book, because that's why we're here. I mean, I could talk to Tony about talking all night, but let's talk about the book, because as of this very moment, we are at, and I'm pulling it up on the phone, $102,432 from 1,774 backers, with 16 days left to go on this thing.
Yeah.
How does it feel to know that many people want to read your story?
Well, it's flattering. It makes me feel good about not only about my story, it makes me feel good about graphic novels and about comic books. And it makes me feel good about, it's just, it's not really for kids. It's just a form of entertainment. And it's a form of media. And I feel great about that. I'm flattered. I'm, to be honest with you, I'm shocked. And we've also never, and Dirk, you know this because we talked extensively about it. We never really promoted it on TV yet. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Once the Kickstarter is over and we start promoting it on TV, which we will, who knows where it's going to go? I mean, the sky's the limit with this. And I've got a lot of friends who've sent me texts, says, I've joined, I've pledged. I'm thinking, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate you following and being excited about this. Plus, there's a lot of stretch goals that have been kind of snuck under the rug, so to speak, under the door, that I have no idea what I've got myself into with these stretch goals. So, but it's fine. Whatever you want. I mean, Dirk knows this. I'll do whatever he wants. But so I'm looking forward to what once this gets published and once we start moving on after Kickstarter, what it's going to bring.
And Tony raised a good point too. I think another piece of this that is so exciting to me is how many people who are not comic book fans who are buying this graphic novel because it's a book about Tony, who is a very beloved figure in wrestling. And one of the things that when we put this book together was, with it being the 10-chapter book, almost immediately I decided I wanted to do 10 chapters with 10 different artists, because I wanted to show the power and the diversity of the medium. A lot of people have a certain image of comic books being a certain thing, like Tony got a reference. Oh, those are for kids. And that's the farthest thing from the truth imaginable. Comic books are a medium. They're a way to deliver stories, whether it be horror, comedy, romance, biographical, whatever. So even when I went through picking out the different artists and things like that for the book, and again, I had a certain docket of artists in mind already. I knew I wanted to bring in. And then when I took the book to Source Point Press too, they were, I know those guys, they know me. They were fine with me continuing to kind of have free reign of who to bring in. I really wanted to bring in a diversity of art styles as well. So as you go through the book and the different chapters, you'll see a wide-ranging style of art that was very intentional on my part. And I was a little nervous about it because not all of the artists in this book are that bombastic style of art that I think a lot of people associate with it. But really, I mean, you got people like, I'm just going down the list. DJ Kaufman has done a lot of more independent comic books, very, very realistic, grounded style, perfect intro to the book, perfect opener. You got Sally Scott doing the chapter with Lois, and Sally, as a very unique style. John Marroquin, again, his own style. Les Garner. Jan Apple is more like a manga anime style artist, and then you go from Jan to Colm Griffin, over in Ireland, and then Scott James, who's done stuff on like Savage Dragon, again, that big bombastic style for the WCW chapter. And then, you start bringing some of my old crew, Josh Ross from Tales of Mystery, and Austin McKinley, who's done Tales of Mystery in Nightmare World as well. And then we even brought in a new guy, Ricardo Rosana, who this is his first ever comic work. He's wanted to do comics for a while, but those 10 primary artists alone, and then again, you have the variant cover who unlocked through Scott James, and then you got the standard cover through Mariana Pescosta, who did Haunted Highon, nominated for a Ringo Award for first work. The variety in this book is profound. And I'm really excited to show people, and this may sound a little bit arrogant, but so be it. I'd like to think I'm an ambassador for comics. I'm an ambassador for this medium. I think when people get this book, this 140, 150-page graphic novel, whatever it's going to end up being, and they look through it and they see this variety of art styles and this diversity of art styles and the diversity of the creators in this book, I hope it's going to drive them to explore the medium more. That's really important to me, and I really want that to happen. We could have picked one artist to do everything. And efficiency aside, even, I just wanted to show people the diversity. And then again, we unlocked 10 chapter breaks with 10 more artists. And then we added 4 bonus stories with 4 more artists. So I'm just really hoping to kindle a lot of interest in this medium again as well, and show people the power of this medium that I love so much, and that Tony is such a fan of as well.
Well, let's take a minute, and you've mentioned John Marroquin, and I'm just going to give him a shout out because he would never do it himself.
That's true.
John Marroquin draws wrestling better than anyone I've ever met. Every time I have him do a blank cover, he does a wrestling cover for me.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they're zombie wrestlers, but that's fine too. One of my most prized pieces of art is he did a Walking Dead AAA, lucha cover where they're all zombies, and right in the middle it's Blue Demon Jr., with just 2 dudes' arms hanging out of his mouth. Like, it's one of my favorite pieces ever.
Right.
But John draws wrestling better than just about anybody. So I can't wait to see his work. Scott James, someone who, has done all this big bombastic stuff. I've talked to some of the artists that you brought on for the book. Did you have a list in your mind before, or did you go, once you got the story beats figured out, oh, I know this guy's style would fit with this, or this person's style would fit with that?
Anthology work is not new to me, obviously. When you look at my work like Nightmare World or Buried But Not Dead, or even Tales of Mystery Volume 3, I love the anthology style. I love demonstrating the power of the medium through different artists. So I definitely had a list of people in my mind I wanted to bring in. Josh Ross was a gimme. Austin McKinley was a gimme. Not to talk out of school. Len O'Grady was a gimme, but he had a family tragedy and he broke his arm, so he could not do one of the main stories. Mariana Pescosta from Haunted Highlands, a gimme. And then past some of my crew, my ride or die people, there were artists who I wanted to work with for a while. And again, I put John Marroquin in that group as well. John's another guy I've worked with several times, and then like working with Sally Scott again, working with Jan Apple again. And then also working with people who I've never worked with before. I've wanted to work with DJ Kaufman for 20 years. And when we started formulating the book, that very first chapter of Tony as a young kid watching Wrestling with Uncle John, I knew he was the perfect guy to open the book. You got Les Garner, who we've talked about working together forever. He got hooked up with Source Point Press for Apocalypse Girl, did really well for the publisher. And we were always talking, when are we going to work together? It was a no-brainer to bring in Les's style for this book. Again, we talk about Scott James, another guy I wanted to work with a long time. Fantastic choice to do the WCW chapter when you're going to have Sting and Hogan and all these larger-than-life characters. When Len had to bow out from doing a larger chapter in the book, Mariana, who did the main cover, she told me, and I will do my best not to do my Italian voice for Mariana.
Yeah, please don't.
I'm going to do it anyway. She said, hey, Dirk. No. But she said, what about my friend Ricardo? He's wanted to do comics for a long time. He just hasn't gotten that break. I trust Mariana implicitly. She's my sister from another mister. So when she showed me his work, I was like, perfect. Bring him in. He has more of a cartoony style like Len had. Perfect fit. So I had a pretty good idea, I think, from the jump of who I wanted to bring in. And then even people who couldn't commit to a full 10-page chapter, bringing in people like Brian Silverbacks was here in the chat earlier.
Drina's going to choke slam you. We're going to have a pay-per-view here on the experience.
Because I was doing the Mariana voice. She's like, I do not sound like a Mario. And I'm like, yes, you do. But Brian Silverbacks, again, big wrestling fan. This is an exclusive for you, Kyle, because I haven't talked about the pinup artist yet. I'll give you a couple. Brian Silverbacks, who's in the chat, did one. Grant Perkins, who I worked with Nightmare World back in the day, did one. Scoot McMahon did one of the pinups. Ani Hanyan, who did the Ad-Free Shows book, is doing one of the backup stories. Mike Watson is doing one of the backup stories. Those are names I haven't even dropped yet. Sean Daly doing the insert cover we unlocked as another stretch goal. It's been great to bring in people I know and people whose work I want to get out there in front of people. People are extremely talented. So I had my roster, and then like Colm Griffin, I didn't mention him yet, I don't think. Or I did briefly. Travis McIntyre recommended him. And he's like, Colm's a great artist, bring him in. We had another artist who was initially attached to the book. And then right when it started, he said, I have to bow out. I can't tell you why. I really want to do this, but you'll understand why when it comes out. And Travis and I both knew. It was like, this has got to be pretty major. I mean, if he's stepping away from this, because he really was into it. He's drawing Spawn. Okay. Sorry, Tony. It's like, Todd McFarlane came in with that Todd McFarlane money, and that was the end of that. So,
got it.
Kevin, happy as hell for you. We get it. But he couldn't even tell us at the time. And Travis and I talked, and we're like, he must have got scooped by Marvel or someone got him on something. Well, yeah, he's drawing the music. I'm like, okay.
Well, we could do a Spawn meets Lois.
That's true. You have Lois be the violator.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
You'd have to know Lois.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
let's
really
reset
love you,
here.
Lois. Deep down, way deep, very deep.
Let's reset here. And I love to ask people questions they couldn't possibly be prepared to answer.
Mm.
And so the question I'm going to ask, because I just love asking this question of people. Dirk, you don't get to answer. I've heard your answer a million times. Tony, you have the ultimate pop culture garage. You could have one spaceship and one car from all of pop culture. What do you put in your garage?
Oh, you put the Enterprise, and you put the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
See, that's a well thought through answer. And you've thought about this question before, I'm sure.
You know what? I haven't, but it was a no-brainer with me. I mean, I want to explore, and I wouldn't mind exploring the future. So
I thought you were going to say you're going to go back
so
in time, maybe to change some things, but all right, that worked.
yeah, sure would. June 6, 1981. Go home. Don't get married.
Oh,
You guys are going to get killed.
you know, we rib on Lois, but I will tell you, and I think I talked about this one other time. When we did the chapter in the book, which was chapter 2, about it's called an unexpected dinner, and when Tony talks about meeting Lois, and I don't want to give away too much out of the book, so it'll surprise people who don't know. They had a very short courtship, very short. And of course, we get Tony's side of it. Again, I'm going to give, it sounds like Gina Joe just got off the call here. She said bye, so I can give her credit safely now. She's like, because there's all these guys in there. It's me and Tony and Dawkins and stuff like that. And she goes, this is all fine, but we need to hear Lois's version of this. And Tony, to his credit, goes and gets Lois, and Lois comes in and knocks Tony out of his chair. Tony's sitting back there with Bug and sprawled out in his jams. Mm-hmm. And Lois then tells the story of how she recalled them meeting. And it was a great call by Drina Joe to bring her in. But here you got all of us sitting there sobbing, crying, not from laughing, because the story was so sentimental the way she told it.
Yeah, she's
it was
a bullshit artist. She's a good one.
Yeah, she was a great bullshit artist. It was fantastic. I mean, she just absolutely wooed us. Tony's back there the whole time, like.
Well, it took 4 hours.
Right. Yeah, that was our longest call.
Yeah, it was longer than Zack Snyder's Justice League.
And then arguing about the dinner, what the dinner was, because like that was like the kicker of this whole thing is like, here's this romantic story, and it's just beautiful. And then they turn to the old married couple arguing about what dinner Lois prepared for Tony that convinced him or snookered him into marrying her, depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
But so anyway, we like Lois, and we will rib Lois forever. But man.
So I wanted to ask Tony one other thing, and we've got some comments in the chat about your rig there. Podcasting has become a pretty big part of the Tony Shiavone empire, as it were. Tell us about your podcasts and tell us how you came to podcasting. Who brought you to that?
Well, Conrad Thompson brought me to podcasting, and at the end of 2015, I lost my job with WSB Radio that I had for 13 years, and was looking for things to do. And 2016 was a very, very tough year for our family and for me personally. Just trying to call a bunch of jobs together to stay afloat. I still had the Braves, still had the Georgia Bulldogs, but I needed more. And so after a very, very bleak 2016, in January of 2017, Conrad Thompson got in touch with me via email and gave me a proposal to do a podcast based on my WCW years. And I originally didn't want to do it because I originally just thought, you know what? I'm not going crawling back to wrestling. I'm going to try the best I can to do something else. And so, Lois and I talked about it. The the email was very, very well written. It was very well thought out. I think Conrad has had that pasted on our Patreon page. It was a business plan. It was more than just a, hey, let's do a podcast. It was a business plan about how we can market it and how we can sell merchandise. And so I went to Lois and I said, I don't know if I really want to get back into this. She said, well, our daughter got engaged. She got engaged at Christmas 2016, and she's going to get married, and it's going to be a big expense there. So it may help pay for it. So I said, yeah, you're right. And so I talked to my daughter. My daughter said, Laurie said, okay, I'll put it off for a year. And I told Conrad, I said, okay, let's go for it. And we started doing it. And not only did it help pay for my daughter's wedding and the reception, it paid for everything the podcast did. And so we had a very nice wedding, thanks to Conrad and Conrad had seen me in a NWA Fan Fest in 2016, in August 2016, and thought, man, he's got some pretty good stories, and he's a pretty good storyteller. And he's got quite a personality that no one had really ever seen, because I'd kind of been a straight man throughout my career in wrestling. So this podcast opened up me to what is really my personality. And it got rave reviews. It got big downloads. Conrad put together this network, and we're now on Westwood One, and we've got our own pay channel, which does very, very well for us. So it was really Conrad's inspiration that got me back into it. And this started my trek back into wrestling, because we started in January 2017. And I remember we had just cut a podcast on a Sunday, because we downloaded on a Monday back then. And he said, are you going to watch the Royal Rumble tonight? And I said, hell no. He said, it may be a good idea you start watching wrestling again. I said, why? He said, just to get back into it. To say, if somebody talks about it, be able to know, sound like you know what you're talking about. And I started watching Royal Rumble. It's the first time I'd watched wrestling since 2001. And so that started me back into wrestling, and then started doing MLW, and then got involved in AEW. And so, but really the kickoff was Conrad wanted to do a podcast with me. He did one with Bruce Pritchard about the WWE. And he wanted to do one with WCW. And now he's got me, he's got Eric Bischoff, he's got JR, he's got Arn Anderson, he's got Kurt Angle. He's got a podcast every day of the week. He's probably going to extend it even more, and even to the weekend. So it started then in 2017, January 2017, and we're in our 5th season right now of doing this podcast.
It's it's one of those things is that I credit Conrad Thompson a lot with getting me back into wrestling, because I started listening to the podcasts.
Right.
And I had been away largely for a while from the fandom, and I started listening to the podcast. I'm like, God, I miss it.
Yeah.
And then our associate producer, who's kind of in the background right now, and he was in the comments, Chris Dar, when the announcement came that you were going to AEW, I think I sent those guys a text and went, oh my God, sign me up. Where do I go? What do I watch? Get me back into this. And It was all kind of downhill from there.
Yeah, well, Conrad was instrumental in that too, because I was originally contacted by the WWE and Bruce Pritchard, who's a very good friend. Bruce said, when I get back in, we knew he was going to go back to work for Vince. He said, get my feet wet, get back, get my feet on the ground, so to speak. I'll see if there's a place for you. And he contacted me. He said, hey, there's a place for you. Vince wants to talk to you. I said, okay. I called Conrad. I said, can you believe that the WWE wants to talk to me? Conrad hung up the phone, immediately called Cody Rhodes, and Cody sent me a text that same day, said, I don't want you to work for the WWE. And I said, okay, we've had dinner, we've chatted. You've never offered me a job, you dumbass. So what's it going to be? He said, let me let you talk to Tony Khan. And I talked to Tony Khan, and then I was sold on Tony and them. And the WWE ended up not really offering me anything. So they were just kind of talking about it. So Conrad kind of has really been the reason I'm back into business right now. I mean, he really is on many levels.
And we cover all of that in Butts and Seeds, that whole thing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So everybody, there are links in the comments. Head over to buttsandseatscomic.com. Click on the big green back this project button. Get in now. Everything that happens now is just bonus content. It's just bonus. The book is funded several times over. So everybody who gets in now is just along for the ride and is in for some treats. Real quick, with the last few seconds we got, Tony, where can people follow you on social media? Where can they go to support you going forward?
You can follow me at Tony Shiavone 24. That's on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook, I don't even go there because Facebook is just kind of like me and my my old geezer friends back from my home state of Virginia sharing pictures of grandchildren. Although we do have a WHW Monday Facebook page, you can go there and follow my antics there. So you can do that. And there's a WHW Monday Twitter as well. So, but it's at Tony Shiavone 24. Got a lot of followers. My daughter does a great job managing that site and all my other stuff. She does a great job with that. So that's where you can find me. And then, of course, you can find me on Dynamite every Wednesday on TNT, 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central.
I worked out so Wednesdays are my night off from this so I can watch Dynamite. I'm just throwing that out there.
Very cool. Thanks, Kyle.
Dirk, if I let Dirk tell people where to follow him, he'll be here. We'll be here for 20 minutes. So it's head over to dirkmanning.com. All the links are there. Sign up for the mailing list. buttsandseatscomic.com to back the project. 16 days left. Let's get this thing rolling even further.
Yes, and thank you all for your support. Truly, I mean, we didn't expect this level of massiveness, and we're just happy to keep paying it forward to all of you on the book. So thank you, truly.
So I want to thank Tony Shiavone for being here, Dirk Manning for being here on the inaugural Legends Lounge show on the Experience. Stay tuned. Immediately following us for Minute to Skim It with Miss Jen and Hannah live from Space Cadets Collection in Houston, Texas. And we will be back in just about 2 minutes. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Kyle.
You.